I'm sure at the current moment there's a lot of mixed opinions about the 7th anniversary, but there's still some hope for things that people would like to see. One of the things a lot of people wanted to see for the first part was a Legends Limited Super Gogeta. Fusing or not, but from Fusion Reborn, it's a character people were expecting to show up and just didn't. But there's still a chance that this character could show up in part 2 and maybe even later on in the anniversary. So in this video, we're going to be discussing how likely is it that Super Gogeta arrives in the 7th anniversary. Question for the guys in the comments: if Super Gogeta does not drop in this anniversary, will you be disappointed? Me personally, I think it depends, but for the most part, yeah. But let's get into this video now. Now, I already expect that a lot of you guys don't have high expectations for the part 2 of this anniversary, and that's namely because in every single part 2 of every single anniversary, the part 2 does not surpass the part 1. It's almost impossible for that to happen. However, we can make an exception this year if we still run with hope of the idea that the 7th anniversary is meant to be the biggest anniversary, and because of that, they will drop a Fusion Warrior not in their first part, but in their second part. Instead of just pushing things as a general idea, I try to bring evidence when I make this video, and the only piece of evidence I could find for Super Gogeta being a part 2 or later unit in the 7th anniversary is that Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle in their 10th anniversary, which you could say is easily their biggest year, they dropped Super Gogeta in their part 2. In their part 1, they had Super Vegito, but instead of doing 2 Fusion Warriors in part 1, they actually dropped 3 characters that are of equivalence of a Legends Limited. So part 1 had 3 Legends Limiteds, let's say. Part 2 had 3 Legends Limiteds, and it was quite overwhelming but fun at the same time. For more details, in part 1, they actually dropped a SSBE Vegeta with an MUI Goku that somewhat tags along. It's more like an assist unit like we have with some units, for example, Zamasu Goku Black, not a tag unit like Goku and Vegeta, which we have lots of. We all know that Dragon Ball Legends released after Dokkan Battle, and a lot of the things that Dokkan Battle does, Dragon Ball Legends follow suit. For example, Dokkan Battle actually recently got a Kalen Caulifla, and I think that's a big point to show that Legends is somewhat on track with them, considering we also just got a 1% sparking Kalen Caulifla. So I don't think it's ridiculous for Super Gogeta to show up in the part 2, considering for the Dokkan Battle 10th anniversary, he showed up in their part 2. It's not the strongest point, but it's something you can look at and be like, hey, it did happen in that game, so it must not be impossible in this game. Another big pushing point for this idea is that the recent Fusion Warriors have had a bunch of everything except Dragon Ball Z Fusion Reborn, Super Gogeta. If we look at the couple past celebrations, starting with the festival, we got a Vegito Blue, so the DBS arc is out of there. If we go back to the 6th anniversary, we got one from DBZ, which was fusing Super Vegito, but we also got another DBS fusion, which was Gogeta Blue. And I didn't even mention GT. We got Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta 2. So we got every single Fusion Warrior, a character from every single arc. I guess you can exclude Gotenks, but he did drop last year too. If you wanted to go even extra out the way, you could say that we got a Fusion Zamasu this year. So the only 2 we're missing is really Kefla and Super Gogeta, and we know who's bigger out of the 2. So for a character that could appear in the 7th anniversary, it would make a lot of sense if Super Gogeta just made an appearance. Also, following the trend, you have to add with this that they always include a Fusion Warrior in every single celebration, and I don't think they're gonna start now not including one. It's almost a guarantee, and I feel like if they didn't, it just wouldn't feel like the anniversary. You can say that's biased if you want, but it's objectively true that in every single celebration, every single anniversary, they have dropped a Fusion Warrior, and for them to start now and not do that would be a really interesting decision from the Dragon Ball Legends developers. Just saying. This here is a bit more hopeful, but you have to hear me out because it makes a lot of sense. In every anniversary, we would end up getting a new mechanic. You could say that Vegeta brought in the evolve gauge, but I really think it's just a step from the attack gauge made slightly better so that he can reach his peak form. But let's just say we're not including the evolve gauge and we actually have a new mechanic that is visually apparent, you know? Something like Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta's counter, something like fusing Super Vegito with his Rising Rush guaranteed win, the Strike Assault, things like this that actually enhance the gameplay tenfold. If we get a new mechanic like that, there needs to be a character that it would release on, and I think a Fusion Warrior would just be the safest bet, since that's what they pretty much always do. Every time they drop a Fusion Warrior, they bring out something that we haven't seen before, and it's just ridiculous that they always do that. So naturally, since we haven't got a Fusion Warrior yet, it would make the most sense if they keep that pattern and then drop a new mechanic on a Fusion Warrior. What that mechanic would be, I don't know, but if it's going to be Fusion Reborn Super Gogeta, I think there's a lot of people that have some ideas in the comment section, but the developers will figure out something. We could also get the possibility of different endings. So like I mentioned in Dokkan Battle in their 10th anniversary, they got a Super Gogeta, but what they do is you can synchro synchro, but depending on which character you synchro on, you get a different outcome. So if you synchro as Goku, you won't transform into Gogeta. You will just go Super Saiyan 3 with Goku, and Vegeta will be Super Saiyan. If you synchro with Vegeta, then you end up as Super Gogeta, and that can add more value to the kit overall, add more depth to the kit overall, and it will actually feel like the anniversary actually has started for the people that don't have that feeling already. That was just an idea of one of the mechanics they could drop, but the bottom line is we haven't got a mechanic that is visually game changing. So naturally, if that was to happen, I think one of the best contenders for that would be Fusion Reborn Super Gogeta. This might also be a reach, but I think it's a very hot point that you should think about when you go about every celebration in Dragon Ball Legends. Dragon Ball Legends, the developers never go a celebration without dropping a movies unit. They have so many movies to choose from, and that means they have a lot of hot characters that they can pick as well. And I think naturally, if they're gonna drop a Fusion Warrior or they're gonna drop something hype, it should be the Fusion Warrior Super Gogeta. We haven't got one in a long time. The last time we got one was Pikkon and Super Gogeta, and he wasn't even on his own. And the time before that was Ultra Super Gogeta. So we haven't got one in a really long time, at least as a standalone. But the tradition of them always dropping a Fusion Warrior also exists with them always dropping a movies unit. We can literally go back in time and we'll see a movies unit every single time. In the 2024 festival, we got Beast Gohan. But then if we go further to the 6th anniversary, we got Gogeta Blue. In the 2023 festival, we got Beast Gohan again. And then in the 5th anniversary, we got the Gammas 1 and 2 and Orange Piccolo. In the 2022 festival, we got Ultra Gogeta Blue. And then in the 4th anniversary, we got Dragon Fist. I know I said every anniversary, but at least for modern Dragon Ball Legends. So I would say upwards from the 2020 festival and the anniversary after that, it's been consistent trend of movies unit. They haven't missed one celebration. The 1st anniversary and the 2nd anniversary, they have no movies units to my recollection, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. So again, not the strongest point, but it's something that's up there in the air that you can take as a possibility. This is gonna be the final point, but it's another weak point, to be honest. There's just a bunch of weak points, but they all have some sort of processing going into them. So remember how I mentioned that they dropped a bunch of Fusion Warriors within the last year, and they pretty much ticked all the boxes. If we just include Gogetas and Vegetos, each one covers all of the elements, and that means Super Gogeta is going to be red. Now, before I even explain the process, I don't think he needs to be red, but he's most likely going to be red. It's not as concrete as the MUI theory. Even though a majority of us believed he was going to be an Ultra, he did still end up being blue, which all of us expected. But with Super Gogeta, we have to look at the other ones. So we got Fusing Super Vegeto and Fusing Gogeta Blue. They are blue and yellow. Then in that same anniversary, we got Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, who's purple. That's 3 elements knocked down, and that leaves red and green. But then in the festival, during the part 1, we got Vegeto Blue, who is green, and that means the only element we're missing out is red. We ticked off blue, we ticked off green, we ticked off purple, and we ticked off yellow, so we're only missing one, and it would make a perfect Fusion Warrior team covering all bases if Super Gogeta was to drop right now and they was to make his element red. His element doesn't have a direct correlation to him dropping, but if you hold the point about the Fusion Warriors all being dropped and they haven't dropped the Super Gogeta, it makes a lot of sense that when he does drop, he would be red, and there's no better time than now, which is the 7th anniversary. Unfortunately, I have no other factors that could go towards a potential Super Gogeta dropping in his anniversary, so that means it's time for me to give my percentage on how likely I think it is to be a thing. In reality, I don't see it being that high. It's definitely not over 50%, so the number I'm going to give it is actually a 40%. A 40%, a very optimistic 40%, but I can't realistically grant it a higher number than that. Some of the factors I gave, they've just been too consistent in their trends, so I actually knocked the number up a few points, but for it to go higher than 40% would just be copium, I'm not gonna lie. It's 40% at the max. And some of you might be like, nah, it's definitely higher than that, but there's no actual reasons for it to be higher than that, besides from the idea that you just want one. If you take that away, then he should have just dropped already, but they decided to go the whole part 1, making it universe rep. So in reality, reality, we're just pulling at straws, hoping for it to be a thing. And I said we because we all need a Fusion Warrior this anniversary. Jokes aside, I do want him to drop. Well, the odds are not looking very likely right now, especially considering we have to consider the other things such as an Ultra. And if they do drop him in part 2, they won't drop him alone. So who else are they going to drop him with? As we saw in the part 1, they paired the characters together, SSBE and MUI Goku. They're from the same arc, so they'll probably do the same thing in part 2. And I can't see anything else hanging with Super Gogeta if they were going to drop him and they had to drop another Legends Limited beside him. So unfortunately 40% is all I'm giving. Unfortunately, that's going to make the end of the video, but I hope this video has made you somewhat optimistic for the part 2 of the Legends 7th anniversary. Even if you're not feeling it right now, you still want to enjoy it because we've been waiting for it to start. I'm not gonna lie, I am enjoying it, and I always knew I was going to enjoy it, but my spirits aren't as high as I expected them to be when going into the 7th anniversary. I'll make a different video regarding that as a topic on its own, but I did want to talk about Super Gogeta, as I didn't even get the time to talk about it prior, as the leak threw everything out of whack. We had our priorities fixed on what we already knew. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you haven't already, make sure to press the subscribe button. We're on this grind to 200,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for watching the video, man. My name is Zakashi, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man.